setting goals in a way that are tangible, palpable, feel like it's something that is completely within your grasp, but you know that you want to get to. From there, you can build upon what's next instead of what what am I going to reach 2,000 steps from now? What am I going to reach 3 steps from now?
Welcome to the Tech Guide podcast. I am the show's host, Ryan Atkinson. Everyone is wanting to break into tech and have a successful career. The only problem is how. We'll use this podcast to sit down with people that have broken into tech, pivoted their career, or have actual advice to young working professionals. Today, we have Mark Pasadilla on the podcast to talk about the boot camps that General Assembly offers and how to figure out if one of their boot camps or any boot camps is right for you. His top soft skills that someone young in their career should have or should start to develop, and networking strategies and stories he has from networking. I specifically asked this question because we hear a lot about networking on the show, and I just wanted to hear a real story that he has, and he has like multiple stories. So super good part of this episode. So make sure to follow or subscribe to this podcast and share with any other friends that may want a tech guide. You can also learn more about us at techguide.org. Mark, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you.
Appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes. And a question I'm dying to ask, kind of on topic, not, but you've coached boxing and fitness classes, which I think is super, super cool. I'm curious, like, how has coaching these classes helped your professional careers that others may really not notice how coaching can benefit your professional career?
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great question. I mean, I have a background in athletics, just kind of growing up and whatnot. And so that was why my interest kind of drove in that direction, kind of as a side opportunity while I was actually a recruiter in tech. But how that's kind of helped me now as a coach, I like to tell the students and the job seekers that I work with that I view coaching kind of in this two-pronged approach thing, or not necessarily a two-pronged approach, but in two different buckets. There's what I like to view as an X's and O's coach. Someone who kind of can call the play, go to the whiteboard and tell people exactly where they're going to go to achieve success. Then there's the player's coach, the person who can light that fire underneath individuals, kind of inspire, motivate, and let them know that, hey, you got this. I lean players coach, and I got that a lot through coaching boxing, coaching fitness. That just kind of comes out of me naturally. And so that's helped me a lot in coaching individuals now who are seeking to get into the tech space as, career transitioners. That's just something that's a bit innate within me. And yeah, I utilize that to its fullest extent just because that's kind of who I am.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think it would be really cool because I feel like coaching from like the little that I know of coaching like youth camps and whatnot, I feel like it is always a rewarding experience because then you can take that into your professional life, like you said, and be like, well, I'm going to help recruiter or people break into tech the same way I'm going to like give feedback to while I'm actually coaching.
Right, right, for sure.
Yeah. And so I want to start off really because you've had an awesome career. Like you're a project manager for many years. You're in the fitness industry. You're in a social media specialist at Nike, which is super, super sick. Then in April 2018, you got into recruiting. Take me to April 2018. Why the switch to recruiting then?
Yeah. So this is one way that I like to connect with the job seekers and the students that I work with now at General Assembly, because we're largely in part, we work with those who are looking to pivot, right? So transition careers into tech. That was me back then at that time, not necessarily looking into tech, so to speak, but I was one of those kids who graduated from college and I was like, well, now what? And I leaned on certain strengths. I was always a good relationship builder, always a good communicator. And so coming out of grad school in sport management from USF, Nike just kind of felt like it was a good transition for me. I felt like, oh, this is the connection. This is it. And so that's how I landed on the social media team there. After a couple of years there, I built great connections, but it wasn't quite hitting for me in terms of that relational development and kind of realizing that where I shine was in helping others grow and develop. I didn't realize that at that time. So I kind of like jumped around. I went into project management. I went into the nonprofit space. And it was through those experiences that the one thing that always floated to the surface was that I enjoyed working with others and helping them get to where they wanted to get to. And so that's what led me to recruiting. I got my feet wet with recruiting in the staffing agency space. And then I eventually went internal and started to build my chops there. So that's what got me to that point in time.
Yeah. So it sounds like it was a lot of like relationship building, which is obviously one of the most important skills as a recruiter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 1000%.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can we talk a little bit about General Assembly? Because I feel like this is like a resource that people they may know about. They may know there's programs like this out there, but can you give us like a high level overview about what General Assembly offers?
Yeah, yeah. So General Assembly, I mean, like you said, there's other programs out there nowadays that kind of fall within this boot camp space, right? And General Assembly is that we offer immersive tech boot camps, if you will, for people who are either looking to skill up, looking to actually pivot careers, just kind of gain that skill in different verticals, be it data science, data analytics, X design, software engineering. There's also some other one-off courses in there that you can take, but the crux of what General Assembly offers is these fully immersive programs where it's either you can either go way of 3 months, or if you're working full time, you can go into one of our flex programs, which is catered to that to be more of a part-time course. But overall, it is a boot camp style institution where you can pick up some foundational knowledge within those verticals I mentioned.
Yeah. And like, who are these boot camps like for? Because, like you said, there's a ton of boot camps out there. It could be if you're full time, part time, if you're right out of school, and you want to pivot already. Like, who's like the people that are typically going to General Assembly? And to note, everyone, this is not like a promotion for General Assembly. Mark is literally just from General Assembly. It's a great resource for people to like check out. So, can you give a little bit of context of who checks this out?
Yeah, it's kind of widespread. You'd be surprised. I mean, there are folks who come either straight out of college, folks who didn't go the traditional route of getting a 4-year degree, but kind of entered the workspace in some form or capacity just to start picking up some experience, but then realized my passions lie elsewhere, whether
Yeah.
design, software engineering, whatever it may be, all the way up to folks who have had seasoned careers and just kind of feel like they want to change. So I would probably say the vast majority of the General Assembly student has kind of been somewhere in that maybe 3 to 5 year range in terms of work experience,
Yeah.
but just are looking to pivot from one industry to another, be it service industry, healthcare industry, finance industry. That kind of varies wildly, but yeah.
Yeah. And is there one right now that you're seeing like people are taking these courses? Is there one that's like super hot right now? Cause like data analytics, I'm assuming is a really hot course, but like what are people like typically like signing up for right now, just for a industry what spectrum of it?
What we have seen thus far, software engineering is actually our probably our most popular program
Mm,
from my experience anyways, as far as career coaching is concerned. UX design would probably be a close second, but I would say software engineering has been the largest to this point.
yeah. And if someone is wanting to sign up for like a general assembly course, they come to Mark like, hey, like I want to do one of your courses. Like, what's like three things that you tell them to like really like hone in is like, is this really for you? Or like, how should people think about like, is this for me when they're signing up for any boot camp?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the first question you need to ask yourself when considering that is why? Why is this something that is powerful to you? Because the boot camps are pretty quick. I mean, 12 weeks or 24 weeks, depending on which one you would work best for you. Either way, they go lightning fast. And there's a lot of information that you learn in that amount of time. And being able to keep up with such dense course material in that much time can be a little bit overwhelming. And so really trying to hone in on what is my end goal here by taking something or pursuing a boot camp such as this? Is it that I really truly do want to enter this space as
Mm,
as a professional in that respective area? Or is it that I just kind of want to, I think I like playing video games and just kind of curious about what goes into the programming behind that and it ends there? When you hone in on what it is that that is truly important to you within that space, then you can kind of decide, all right, what do the different boot camps that are out there, what do they offer? I think what sets us tends to set us apart is that we have the career coaching aspect.
mm,
Our outcomes team is what we call it. And that parallels their course instruction the whole way through versus like, okay, you go learn your 12 weeks and then after you graduate, then I'll come in as a career coach. It's not quite like that. We go with you throughout that journey the whole time. So considering what it is that you need will be really helpful in making that decision.
that's interesting. And then can you give us like an overview? Let's just say like, okay, like I talked to Mark, like, yes, like I'm super excited to like sign up for one of these courses. Like,
if they like 12 weeks, for example, like what's like typically found in like a general assembly like course for like a boot camp?
Typically found in, well, I mean, like I said, it's like a lot of foundational knowledge, you know?
Yes.
It is definitely catered to someone who's coming in very green and then builds from there on certain elements that are prevalent and relevant to that respective industry today. But it is also built to kind of nudge you to learn how to learn, so to
Mm,
speak. Yeah.
that's really, really cool. I do want to pivot a little bit more to like advice for young working professionals. So that's what I'm super curious about as a young working professional in just as a young working professional. So take me to like the early days. Like what's one thing that you think like every young working professional should get right early on in their career?
Ooh, that's a good question because I was one of those folks where I was like, I don't know what to do. No, I think, but now, looking back, right? Everything in hindsight's always 2020. So for young professionals now kind of starting out, I would definitely say set your goals, figure out what your goals are, but that doesn't mean necessarily like I just graduated from college. I should know where I want to be 5, 10 years from now. I always struggled with that question when whether asked in an interview or just in general, like, "Oh, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Especially nowadays, because things move so quickly with the
Yeah.
digital age and whatnot, it's hard to answer that. So I think setting goals in a way that are tangible, palpable, feel like it's something that is completely within your grasp, but you know that you wanna get to. From there, you can build upon what's next instead of what what am I gonna reach 2,000 steps from now? What am I gonna reach 3 steps from now? Like, if
Mm,
it it that way, then you can build a rhythm. And if you ever pivot along that way, that's totally fine because you can always look back and see what you have done at that point in time. So, I think it's hard nowadays because most people are like, "I wanna get there now."
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's like an important step that you said, because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, like I see like my end goal here, like where I want to go. But like you said, you basically have to take 3 steps before you can get to 2,000 steps, which is a very important concept that a lot of people like my age, even myself, like probably can't really wrap their mind around yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, patience is a virtue.
Yeah. Is there like an action? So like setting goals, great, setting goals. Like what should be like in your goals? Should it be like, I want to reach this salary in X amount of years. I want to reach this job title in X amount of years. Or like, what are some things that you would recommend if someone is going to set goals, what they should like specifically include?
I think you gotta look internally. You gotta look at your passion. What's meaningful to you, right? Are you someone like me who came in, who had a background in athletics, knew I like was always interested in sports? How can I get into that field or do something that really, really interests me and that I'm strongly passionate about, but do this kind of work? Is there a way for me to be a software engineer in the sports industry? You know, because when you look at it that way, you're setting yourself up to feel better about the work you're doing
Mm,
versus just kind of eyeing a number. Some people do that where it's salary is very important and that there's no knock against that. That's kind of the way things go. So I think the first thing is to look inside yourself and be like, well, what do I care about? And
mm.
then from there, okay, I know I always care about these certain things here. Is there a way for me to maximize spending time on those things as a working professional? Okay, now who can I have conversations with?
Mm.
Right. I tell all my students networking is king. They're probably sick of hearing it, but it's just true. So, what are your passions? Who can you network with? And then have those conversations and see who they know too.
Yeah. What are some of the networking strategies that you use that you tell your students, hey, like if you're passionate about this, go reach out to people? Is it through LinkedIn, through email, or like what are some specific strategies that you use for networking?
Yeah. Well, COVID certainly threw a wrench in some of that, didn't it? LinkedIn is huge. LinkedIn's huge nowadays. I mean, it's the largest networking site that a lot of people use. And there are a lot of ways to just kind of find out who does what, where,
Mhm.
and you can kind of get a glimpse into their own, career arc or professional journey and see if that's interesting or resonates with you. And then you can reach out to those people. But there are other ways to go about things. I share things like this is a shout out to adplist.org. It's a site built for mentorship, people who have signed up there purposely seeking mentees to kind of help out. And that's a great place, low hanging fruit to be able to start your networking. But if you even want to start more shallower or or more internally, looking at, well, who do I know now? Who do I know now that either is doing what I'm interested in, is doing something adjacent to what I'm interested in, or know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that is, doing something I'm interested in. That's grassroots networking, really. There are places like meetup.com that host a number of really interesting events. Meetup.com actually hosts a lot of online events now too. So those are just great places to get started.
Yeah. I am curious, like from even like a personal story that you have or like a story that your students have shared, is there like one specific example where like networking has like really benefited someone's like, oh, I found my job through networking, or does any like story come to mind?
Yeah, this one. I landed at GA through the power of networking. I was recruiting, I had been recruiting for about 4+ ish years. And I knew that I wanted to get more deeper into personal and professional growth and development. I found out about career coaching. I just didn't know about it within an organization. I knew career coaching as like an individual business.
Yep.
But when I found out about it as something that is a part of organizations, I started to dig a little bit and be like, well, who can I talk to and learn more about that stuff? I landed on General Assembly. I reached out to 5 different career coaches and managers there, and I had 5 separate conversations. This was in November of 2021, and great conversations, right? But there was nothing open at the time. Cool. I maintained contact. 4 months later, April 2022, they reached out to me, basically saying, hey, remember that conversation we had? Are you still on the market? Entered into an interview process, and that's what got me the job. So
That's amazing. And how did you like stay in touch with them? Was it like just like LinkedIn messages every like month or so? Or I think that's a really cool story because like you didn't get denied first, but there was an opportunity there first, but one opened up 4 months later. So I think that's really cool. Like how did you do like stay in touch?
yeah, no. So I did use the power of LinkedIn to first
Yeah.
kind of make conversations with people there. And then through that, it was either through LinkedIn or email because I was able to secure, that kind of contact information through that. I had a number of informational interviews. And then from there, yeah, I just maintained contact through those platforms just to kind of keep the conversation alive, but not necessarily be annoying. I spaced it out enough to be like, how you doing? Check in type of stuff. And yeah.
That's really sweet. Was there like one thing like throughout your networking process that you did that like you think really stood out to people or vice versa? Is there like one networking strategy people have used on you where like that has really stood out to you?
Well, for me, in terms of the networking I did for myself, I've leaned on guerrilla networking on LinkedIn. I've also, in all the jobs I've held, have always been able to make great connections with people there, and have
Mm,
always kind of been able to reach out and shoot my shot, so to speak, in terms of like, letting them know where I was and if they knew anyone that would be worth talking to. I think that's important to think about when you're networking, right, with others. It's not I try to tell people, don't go into networking expecting to get something back. Go
mm.
in with an interest in that person that you are talking to, because you want to learn about them. And then the important ask is, do you think there's anyone else that I should be talking to about this?
Mm.
That could either, you could either the conversation could either end there. I'm like, oh, well, I'll think about it. And then you don't hear back. Or they say, oh yeah, let me set you up with so and so. And both are fine. It's just a matter of putting it out there and shooting your shot. So that's worked really well for me. In terms of how other people have networked with me, usually that's been through personal connections because I've just kind of been able to build great relationships. And that is always like interesting because you always find out, oh, this person and that person. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like relationship building has been like one of like the biggest things in your life. Even like getting this role, you just said it right there. Can you share with us, like, has that been like your biggest, would you attribute that to like your success the most is like your relationship building skills? Or what are some like other traits that have really like made you stand out in your career?
I I would say so. I mean, if I'm gonna perform a self-assessment, I do think that the way that I approach building relationships, the way that I approach making connections with people is probably my strength. I love having one-on-ones with
Mm.
people, sitting down and really understanding where a person is coming from, listening actively and drawing a connection to my own experiences as a recruiter, especially if they're a job seeker, and kind of helping them navigate that space. I think also though, like through my own years of experience, it's my communication style has developed in such a way to where I'm able to pull in my own personality. I was lean on humor. That's just something that's
Yeah.
been within me for a while, to being able to make connections to pop culture or whatever it is. I'm able to kind of drive a conversation and keep it as such so that the person feels comfortable and can at least feel like I'm here to help.
Yeah.
So that's helped me along the way in my career thus far.
That's awesome. Because my follow-up question to that is like, what are like some of the important like soft skills? We'll approach it from two ways. What are the important soft skills that someone young in their career should develop? And then technical skills. Are there any like specific technical skills that you think that they should acquire young in their career?
Well, soft skills, we've been talking about it, right? Communication. I think that's an undersold thing, in my opinion. Like being able
Mm.
to communicate well, like people kind of take that with a grain of salt, like, okay, yeah, communication, cool. No, I mean, it really is something. I mean, you're always communicating, whether you're networking, you're interviewing, those things, it becomes really important to those around you in terms of how you are making a connection. Cause that's how we are able to communicate in the first place, is by building a connection and then kind of going from there. So I think the soft skill of being able to communicate well, there's something to be said about being personable.
Yeah.
It's not to say that you need to go out there and like change your personality altogether
Yeah.
necessarily, but being able to just be personable and communicate well or effectively is really good. Technical skills, I would say if you're early off and starting your career, and I mean, some technical skills can dive deeper depending on what space you're trying to go into. Software engineering, there's certain coding languages and programs, right? UX design, there's certain tools that you need to use. But generally speaking, I think you should be aware of how to use such a thing as Zoom nowadays. I think you should be aware of how to navigate such a thing as Slack nowadays for communication purposes. A lot of companies use them widely. And so it helps in terms of just that little step of like, maybe you have an informational interview set up and you're going through technical issues because you didn't quite know how to navigate that. Those kinds of things mean something in the long run. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's being able to like, yeah, like everyone's using Zoom nowadays. Everyone's using some sort of online communication. And like you, as someone that's young in their career, I hope that they're able to like figure out how these technologies work. But I'm sure, I'm sure I would be surprised at the amount that like don't actually know how to work it. I don't know if that's true, but so what are some of like the common mistakes early on? We talked about, just to sum it up, we've talked about what are some of the ways they can work or stand out early in their career? What are some traits? Are there any common mistakes that people make early on in their career that people should probably avoid?
This probably boils back down to like communication again in networking, right? There's a way to, I don't want to say there's a way to, but there are times where you can put people on the defensive when you're reaching out and networking, right?
Mm.
For example, if you reached out aggressively to be like, "Hey, my name is Mark. I came across your profile on LinkedIn and I see that you work at this company. Are you hiring? Can we talk?" That can immediately, and I'm speaking, putting my former recruiter hat back on too, from experience there, because most people will see that message and feel like, "Oh, okay, I don't know you. Hi, first of all." Uh, but so there's a way to be able to mitigate that by communicating in such a way to express interest in them. I think that's some mistake I've seen some people make in terms of reaching out for networking opportunities. Um, Other mistakes that some people make, these aren't necessarily mistakes because very real things, but like not putting forth any, not just not moving, not putting forth any movement when you're in your job search or
Mm.
you're in a move to enter this new space. Some people can freeze up because they feel like, I need to make sure any sort of job application material, my resume, my portfolio, my GitHub, whatever it is, it needs to be perfect. It needs to be flawless before I even start. And I think that's a mistake because if you're
Mm.
young in your career and you're young in your job search, the best way to learn is to fail forward. Get out there and start making connections. Get out there and apply. Um, and you refine from there. You see what happens. And I mean, I come in as a career coach to kind of help mitigate some of those things, but at the same time, I can't make you do anything. I can provide resources, I can provide information, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to take the step. So,
I love that. And Mark, we'll end it there. This was a super awesome conversation just about communication, the General Assembly. All of it was all really good. So, Mark, I really appreciate the time today. Thank you so, so much for joining us. It was a quick one. So, thank you so much for being here.
absolutely, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.